it was a very interesting choice for them to have Iron Man as their first one. That's the superhero that started this journey with the way that they utilize post-credit scenes.
It's the first time they've been used in a way of setting up something larger than the movie itself.
I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative.
The golden era of MCU. This is when everything is clicking.
It was awesome to just continue to see it build and build and build. It's the greatest and most successful cinematic experiment in Hollywood. To have 23 movies from beginning to end to connect to do one story, the Infinity Saga, and to have it almost average $1 billion is something that will never happen again.
This new big bad villain being beaten by ants.
And this is where I feel like Marvel took a breath and said, all right, this is not going well. There's a lot of things that are going against us right now. How do we fix this?
Welcome to the Intake Podcast. We're your hosts, Carson and Travelle McManus, and this is the podcast where we're diving into the media shaping our world today.
And on today's episode, we are bringing to you our Marvel Cinematic Universe deep dive. We have been teasing it for a while. It is. It's taken quite a bit of work to put it all together, and we are excited to just explore where the MCU has been, where it is now, and where it's going moving forward as we enter into probably the three most pivotal films in the MCU's history, with Fantastic Four, Doomsday, and Secret Wars coming up all within about the next year and a half. So we're gonna break it down by phases. And Marvel has this thing where they break the films up into what they term phases of, this is a set of films that kind of tells a complete story. This set of films tells a complete story. And then they have something called sagas, which are multiple phases put together that tell an even bigger story. So we're going to break it down in those terms just to stick to what Marvel has put before us. So I'll turn it over to Travelle, and he's going to kick us off with talking about phase one.
All right, so for phase one, we're going to roll back the clock 17 years here, where we started with our very first MCU movie, not our first superhero movie, but MCU movie with Iron Man, leading into the Incredible Hulk, both in 2008. Then we get Iron Man 2 in 2010 with Thor, and then 2011, Captain America, and then our very first collaboration of them all in 2012 with the Avengers. And this was just a really interesting start to, with Iron Man being the very first one. There's a lot of really cool stories around how they did a whole bunch of A/B testing with little kids. At this time, now we look at Iron Man in 2025, and it's like he's the superhero. Everyone knows who Iron Man is. Everyone knows who Tony Stark is. But that was not the case in 2008. He was very much viewed as a B-list superhero next to like a Spider-Man and a Captain America and a Batman and Superman, kind of adding DCU into that as well. And so it was a very interesting choice for them to have Iron Man as their first one, but it worked. I mean, with a 94% Rotten Tomato ranking, like, it was just really interesting that that's the superhero that we started this journey with, and it just kind of bleed into these other heroes that were introduced to the saga.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that was 17 years ago. I mean, when I do that math, I'm like, oh man, I was 12. And to think about when I did go see Iron Man, I did go see it in the theaters. A group of kids from the neighborhood and one of the dads in the neighborhood took us to go see it. And my parents had no interest and didn't really care. And to think now later that, I don't know, we've had a lot of conversations as a family about the MCU, to go from not caring at all to it being a part of what our family just talks about on a fairly regular basis is a very interesting just way to think about it. So it's crazy that Iron Man is what kicked it off. And even going back, I think that movie holds up as a great superhero film. Whether or not the MCU followed, it in and of itself was a great movie.
Yes. And I think, and then kind of just how it set up each of these, it kind of followed that formula throughout phase one of setting up these characters that we really cared about. So you had Iron Man, Captain America, Hulk, Thor, then, you know, Black Widow and Hawkeye, who didn't have their own standalone movie, but was prominent characters in the movies that they were introduced to, where Black Widow was in Iron Man 2, very important role in that movie, and Hawkeye was in Thor and was also a very important role in that, and leading into the Avengers when they all came together. And so just the setup of that, and I think one of the things that really made Phase 1 special was the way that they utilized post-credit scenes. That was just something that we never really saw in theaters before. And not only were they a focal point and going to watch these movies to see how they end, it's how they use the post-credit scenes to open up the next movie and open up the next part of the story. Like, I remember vividly, you know, Samuel L. Jackson sitting at the, you know, talking to Iron Man and saying, I'm starting an initiative. And, you know, being 12 years old, also not knowing what that meant, and then realizing, oh, this is, you know, there were people in the audience at the movie theater I went to that knew exactly what that was leading up to, and was so excited. And that just made me excited, not even knowing what we were going to get 18 years, you know, in the making. And so it was just, you know, just really cool how they set these characters up. You know, we had our introduction to Thanos after Phase 1 with Avengers, which really plays a lot in keeping the story moving forward in a way that was easy to follow, whether you were someone like us who were diehard superhero fans, or even someone like my mom who was going to these movies with me and was able to kind of keep up with what was happening, who these characters were, how they interacted with each other, etc.
Right. And those post-credit scenes were really important. It's not the first time that anybody's done a post-credit scene, but it's the first time they've been used in a way of setting up something larger than the movie itself. It's not just a wink to the audience, like at the end of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where he's literally like, hey, movie's over, just go. There's a post-credit scene there, and it's really funny, and it works for that movie. But it's not something where we are expecting Ferris Bueller to show up in like 6 other movies and be a part of this larger universe. Although there's part of me that wishes that he would. So, but even the Avengers movie, getting all of those characters together was just such an exciting thing at the time. It is something, we had X-Men movies, but they were all together at once. This is the first time that there's been a culmination, a coming together of 6 different characters together in one movie to fight some other larger being. So when we get to Avengers in 2012, it is a huge event film. I think we see that with the box office, and it is just such a higher number than all the rest of the movies that come before it. If we think about Iron Man through Captain America, the highest grossing movie was Iron Man 2 with just over $600 million. And the Avengers, when it comes out, it destroys that highest number with 1.5 billion, becoming one of the highest grossing movies of all time. And it was just an event that you had to go see. I remember going to get tickets for a Thursday night screening with my friends. It was a school night. Like, it was not our typical thing, but it was like, no, we have to go see this as soon as possible. And then getting Thanos at the end was just a huge reveal, and something that we were like, oh my gosh, who is that? He looks important, but what does that mean? Where's this going? Like, the anticipation had built that, okay, if we can have this culmination and get these 6 characters together in a movie, and then they tease something at the end of that movie, what else is possible in this world? And that was probably the most exciting thing. Was it didn't feel like the end of a story, it felt like just the tip of the iceberg. And then to have what comes after deliver is just such an awesome thing that's never been done before.
Yeah, I mean, it really was just excellent marketing, because what it did is, like, you would leave the theaters just ready to go see the next one. Like, it was almost painful how exciting it was to know, like, this story is continuing with, you know, new stakes, new characters, you know, like, because that's how they were revealed. They revealed Thor. And even though I didn't love the first Thor movie, knowing that this story was expanding beyond just Iron Man and Captain America, and then seeing the hammer at the end of Iron Man 2 and what that led to, and all of these other different things, it just was a really just cool experience to have. And then to even see, like, in Avengers, where we're thinking this is where it's supposed to stop, it's like, no, like, there's someone who's not even on Earth looking down saying, I'm about to, like, I'll do this myself, like, I'm going to cause chaos myself, and knowing that you know, like, eventually they're going to meet and what that's going to look like. Just really just excellent marketing on how they went about these first round of movies.
Right. And so that takes us into phase two. And when we kind of talk about these phases, I think it's important to like identify how many movies were in a phase and how long that phase took. So phase
Yes.
one had 6 movies and they came out over a period of 5 years. So it was a kind of a longer thing. This wasn't something where they were just churning out movies. It was like, okay, if this one succeeds, we have this next one, but we don't have the fourth and fifth one ready yet because we got to make sure that these have some level of success. But going into phase two, they also have 6 movies in phase two, and it's released over 3 years. So the timeline is expedited. We are getting 2 movies a year as we move into phase two. And phase two consists of Iron Man 3 in 2013, Thor the Dark World, also 2013, Captain America the Winter Soldier, and Guardians of the Galaxy in 2014. And 2015, we get Avengers Age of Ultron and Ant-Man. So we start getting 2 movies a year, which is kind of really where this starts to pick up some steam and where I think we're in the sweet spot of how much the audience was able to keep up with and the general going audience. We are the exception to the rule. The fact that we know everything that we're going to talk about tonight is not the norm. But I think the general moving going audience go, oh, 2 superhero movies a year that connect, great, I'm in. And so we get those movies, and it just continues to build on the foundation that was set in phase one. We continue to build on with Tony Stark. We get to kind of see the way that he bears the responsibility of the world on his shoulders, and we see how that kind of breaks him in Iron Man 3 after having that experience in space at the end of the Avengers movie. We have Thor, which Thor: The Dark World. Again, not the best movie in the world, but it builds that relationship with Loki, where we start to see Loki beyond this mischievous character, and his character starts to develop in a way that he becomes very important to the MCU very quickly, beyond just being a villain. And Captain America. Captain America becomes a cornerstone in this movie. He goes from being a guy who's been stuck in the ice since the 1940s to a cornerstone in the modern world. And we also have Bucky reintroduced as the Winter Soldier. And their relationship becomes really dynamic and something that the MCU gets to play around with a lot and still does even to today.
To this day.
We still have Bucky in our life almost over 10 years later. So we have that. Those relationships continue to build. And then we have the Infinity Stones. And the Infinity Stones don't really get defined officially until Guardians of the Galaxy. That's where we get our first big exposition piece telling us what the Infinity Stones are, what they mean, and kind of give us a hint of where this world is going. So in phase one, there's a little bit of retroactive storytelling done in the MCU, where the Tesseract, which is introduced in Thor and then plays a big part in the Avengers, and Loki's scepter in the Avengers are both retroactively made Infinity Stones, where the Tesseract is the Space Stone and Loki's scepter holds the Mind Stone. And we learn that in Guardians of the Galaxy. We also get 2 more Infinity Stones in phase two with the Reality Stone and the Power Stone. And what I think is part of the genius with these Infinity Stones is that they are simple yet powerful, and they are colorful and easily identifiable.
Yeah.
Like, I really think that's the genius of the Infinity Stones, is that the average person goes, oh, that's a colorful little thing in the MCU. That might be an Infinity Stone. And you know what? They were most likely right.
Yep.
So that's what I think the genius of the Infinity Stones are in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
And it also was just always an easy way to connect these stories back together. Because even though, now we have, and I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but just back then it was just, even when we had these standalone movies, there wasn't a lot of crossover that was taking place. So having something as simple as the Infinity Stones to just remind you, like, yes, this is Guardians of the Galaxy, this is his own individual story, but this is also playing into a bigger story, because this stone represents something that you've seen in other Marvel movies as well. And so it was just something that was simple and easy to follow and kept the story moving along while also still not overtaking, the story of Guardians of the Galaxy or Thor: Dark World and all these other movies where we were seeing Infinity Stones pop up.
Right. Not only were they plot devices for the overall story. They played a vital role in the movies that they popped up in. The Power Stone in Guardians of the Galaxy is vital to that story. It's what the whole movie is about, is they're fighting over this Infinity Stone. But then it also comes into play when Thanos gets a hold of it eventually in some of our further movies. And speaking of that, we expand the team in this phase. So 6 movies, we gain a couple more characters, and I think another part of the genius is they only added 1 team. So you have the Avengers team, and they don't go and add the Defenders or the Thunderbolts. They don't add multiple teams. They add 1 team, and it's Guardians of the Galaxy, which at the time was seen as a huge risk. These are characters that no one knew about. I mean, even the people that were hardcore MCU fans or Marvel comic fans, there's some people like, I'm not even sure about these characters. How are we going to make a talking tree and talking raccoon work in a big movie? But they did. And we also get Ant-Man, which had its own whole backstory where Edgar Wright was supposed to be developing this movie alongside Iron Man in 2008. And then due to some scheduling conflicts, it didn't work out. And by the time he gets around to wanting to make it, the MCU is way past the time for introducing his version of Ant-Man, and they have to let him go, get a new director, get a new story on how to introduce Ant-Man into our story. And then we get Vision and Wanda in Avengers Age of Ultron. We also get Quicksilver, who in Age of Ultron is killed, which kicks Wanda off on her story with WandaVision and everything that goes on with Wanda's character. And it kind of takes us beyond Earth. So we move beyond just the Earth. We're expanding outward just a little bit. And we get some more context on Thanos. And it's just that connective tissue that's really easy to follow. In Phase 1, S.H.I.E.L.D. was the connective tissue. In Phase 2, S.H.I.E.L.D. is still there holding the Earth together. But the Infinity Stones are connecting the entire galaxy, the entire universe together.
Mm-hmm. And then taking the outside picture of where the MCU is at this point, you're starting to see that it's starting to pick up steam. And, some of the reviews and also in the box office, in Phase 1, next to Avengers, the highest grossing movie was Iron Man 2 at 600. That's about close to the lowest end on Phase 2, which is Ant-Man. So comparing Iron Man 2 to Ant-Man sounds silly, but that was the momentum where you were seeing more in the upper 500,000s and up 500 million and up in revenue for these movies, with obviously Age of Ultron hitting over 1 million and Iron Man 3 hitting over 1 million as its own standalone movie. Having that, and then also seeing the reviews also kind of uptick, you're starting to see that they're getting comfortable where they're at. People are picking up steam. People are starting to watch these movies and just kind of going from there in Phase 2.
Right. I mean, it's kind of fun to go back and look at it and to see it build in this way, as opposed to trying to keep up with everything that's going on. You're just seeing the momentum build. And I reflect back on it, and it was an exciting time to be a movie fan. It was every time an MCU movie was coming out, you were excited to go see it, even though Thor: The Dark World's not great. Iron Man 3, it's good, it's not great.
Yeah.
Avengers Age of Ultron has aged really, really well.
Yes, it has. It has.
I mean,
people don't love it now. Well, people didn't love it then, but when you look back on it, it is really, it does age really well.
I mean, it just holds up, and you kind of, when you get to see it as a piece of the whole, as opposed to what at the time we thought was the second culminating piece to the MCU. If you have the Avengers being the first really big crown jewel, you're like, okay, Age of Ultron has to be the next crown jewel. And it wasn't. But looking back, it's a very important piece to get us to where we were going. And it holds up in the larger story better than it did as it's on its own at the time. So that kind of wraps up Phase 2 and takes us into Phase 3.
And Phase 3 would almost be considered the golden era of MCU. This is when everything is clicking. We have 11 movies in 4 years. And you would think that's a lot, but we haven't gotten to Phase 4 yet. But staying on Phase 3, we have Captain America Civil War in 2016, along with Doctor Strange. In 2017, we had Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Thor Ragnarok. In 2018, we have Black Panther, Avengers Infinity War, Ant-Man and the Wasp. In 2019, we had Captain Marvel, Avengers Endgame, and then Spider-Man Far From Home. And this is just the combination of all three phases. As Carson was saying earlier, they also had sagas. So the saga was phase 1, 2, and 3. And this very much was as good as of the end of that saga as you can have, with some really high achievements that you saw with phase 3 that we are still craving for even today, as that has been the phase that's been done for over 5 years. I mean, things like Black Panther being its first standalone movie to break $1 billion and currently still has the highest Rotten Tomato ranking with 96. The way, we got 2 Avengers movies in this one, which kind of bleed into one, but are just brought about in a way that, left people speechless, left people in awe. Like, one of the greatest movie theater experience that I think I'll ever have in my lifetime. And so just kind of going through some of these things, like we got some new characters added where we had Doctor Strange, Spider-Man and Black Panther being added in Civil War, and then Captain Marvel. We got some more stones where then they all kind of came together, but we got the Time Stone and Doctor Strange, and then we were introduced to the Soul Stone in Infinity War. But then also we started expanding beyond just characters, but also started diving into different worlds, which I thought was really cool, where we had Wakanda, just being able to learn more about not just a person, but a place and what that meant. And it wasn't just for the sake of just sharing this with people. Like, the Wakandans play actually a very huge role in just, Avengers. And even today, and some of the movies we see now, like, they are a very active group to this superhero society. So learning more about the people and the world there was something that they hit on. And then this new Asgard concept of, seeing Asgard in the Thor movies, but then transitioning Asgard here on Earth and the role that they also play and kind of assisting the Avengers in the great battle that we had, which was Endgame.
Right. And it really was the golden era. And just to have the lowest movie in this phase be rated 79% with Captain Marvel, which I think it's a better movie than that. But
yes,
just to have that be the lowest, and to have the lowest box office be Ant-Man and the Wasp at 622 million, which is almost the highest from phase 1 if you exclude the Avengers, is just crazy. It was awesome to just continue to see it build and build and build. And really, when I look back at it, it was surprising to me to see how quickly we got to Avengers Infinity War from phase 2. Like, it really didn't take that long. It took 3 years to get from Age of Ultron to Infinity War. And I just feel like there was so much that happened between those movies.
Yes.
And to have it all there, we kind of get an Avengers 2.5 with Captain America Civil War, which I think is a better Avengers. It's the best Captain America movie. And it is also one of the best Avengers movies because it has that whole cast there. And it balances those things perfectly. And that kind of leads back to that conversation about Age of Ultron, where if you don't have Age of Ultron, you don't have Civil War. And so it was really a building block there as well to get the characters of Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. He's my favorite. To get Black Panther, and to have Black Panther be nominated for an Oscar is crazy. The first superhero movie to be nominated for an Oscar as Best Picture, not in a small category, not just in an acting or, special effects or anything like that. We had lots of those. But to have it be nominated for Best Picture, and deservedly so, is just so awesome. So there's so much jam-packed in phase 3. And to the point that for those of us that are hardcore fans, we are loving it. We wanted more, but we were also thinking, oh man, I don't know if they can keep up this pace. 3 movies a year is a lot. It's hard to produce one movie in a lifetime, let alone 3 movies from a single studio in a year, all surrounding the same story. And Kevin Feige, who is kind of the architect of this, and we're going to talk about him a lot as we move forward here. He is Marvel's chief, I don't know his title, but Kevin Feige is in charge of all of this. He is the guiding hand that makes all this connect together and work, along with a great creative team and a whole bunch of people working for him. But he's the guiding hand. But to think about him being in charge of producing 3 movies a year is crazy. So there was kind of man, this is awesome, but maybe they should take a step back a little bit. because over the course of 4 years for phase 3, we got 11 movies, and that's crazy. Like, that's it's awesome, and I loved it, and I want to go back and have it happen again, but it's crazy. And we had gotten to the point at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, which made $1.1 billion. We were close to the MCU averaging $1 billion a film.
Yeah.
I mean, they were averaging, I think it was like $890 million a film, which is like, that's crazy. It's the greatest and most successful cinematic experiment in Hollywood to have 23 movies from beginning to end to connect to do one story, the Infinity Saga, and to have it almost average $1 billion is something that will never happen again. They haven't even been able to replicate it since then.
Because we thought Endgame was it. Like, I mean, it was even in the name. Like, we thought, like, we knew that there would be some, like, this, there were going to be stories that were going to keep getting pushed forward. Like, now that we have Spider-Man in this story, in the MCU, we knew we were going to get more Spider-Man movies because he's just, it's just, you want to make money, you put it on the spider suit. And so, but
that's a quote. That's a, if you want to make money, you put on the spider suit.
Put on the spider suit. But yeah, I mean, we thought this was the end, or like at least this was the tail end of it, because it has told a story so beautifully, and it was so much that it was like, where can we go from here? How can this be sustainable? I think this is also because we're in the 2016, 2019 era, so you were seeing a lot of just really good outside movies. I think this is kind of the era of like A24, some other studios were coming up creating movies that were kind of competing with Marvel in box office and things like that. You know, Avatar is still the #1 movie in theaters, and so it wasn't, it just felt like this was the perfect way to wrap things up, and we kind of just assumed that would be the case, but that wasn't the case because we got a phase 4, and phase 4 makes phase 3 look like lightweight, which is crazy.
Which is crazy, a good thing and a bad thing. So, yes, like you said, there was some closure to some of the storylines. We knew that some were going to continue on. We knew more Black Panther was coming, more Doctor Strange. Those who we'd only gotten one full movie with, we expected to carry forward. But the other ones, the other characters, Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, we kind of saw the end to some of their stories, or at least a closing chapter, perhaps, to where we were ready to move forward with the MCU, and it was going to be different. We weren't sure what we were going to get, and we get just this wave of announcements at Comic-Con in 2019. So this is in July. This is after Avengers Endgame has come out, right before Spider-Man Far From Home comes out. And so Marvel, Kevin Feige tells us that Spider-Man Far From Home is more of an epilogue to the Infinity Saga. It tells the story of how people dealt with the world post snap reversal. I don't know what that's called.
The blip.
The blip. They do call it the blip. That's right. So, and with dealing with the blip, with everybody coming back, and there's a whole bunch of like horror movies that like pop up in my head when I think about the blip happening and like a building being built where there wasn't a building before, and like that's a horror movie in and of itself. And there's part of me that wishes Marvel would make that movie, or you know, just a whole bunch of things that you can think about, a whole bunch of weird, awkward situations popping up post blip. But Spider-Man Far From Home kind of deals with that, and that's kind of announced at Comic-Con as, hey, we still have this awesome Spider-Man movie coming. This is great. But here's phase 4. And everybody's going crazy. I mean, we are at peak. Marvel can do no wrong. You can't, like, Kevin Feige could get up there and say, we're going to make a movie about a homeless cat. And people would freak out and be like, this is going to be the greatest movie Marvel's ever made.
Sign me
Even
up.
if it has, like, sign me up, put me in a theater seat, I'll be there. So that's where we're at. We're at, like, this frenzy of Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it's not just the diehards anymore. It's everybody. My parents were excited when they're like, what's coming next? And I told them some of that. They're like, man, that's awesome. I can't wait for that to come out. And then, oh, wait, Disney has this thing coming out called Disney Plus, where it's a streaming service and you'll be able to watch all the Marvel movies in one place. You won't have to subscribe to 6 different things to watch the Marvel movies. And they're going to do original TV shows, which sounds awesome. Every Marvel fan was like, this is a great idea. We can get little stories, we can get connective tissue stories for all of the movies, and it's just going to be great. And so they announced this huge slate for Phase 4 at Comic-Con 2019. They kick it off with Black Widow. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is a Disney Plus show, The Eternals, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, WandaVision, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Loki, What If, Hawkeye, and Thor Love and Thunder. And you're like, holy cow, that's a lot of stuff. There's TV shows, there's movies. They have really awesome logos for all these things, which they did change a little bit as they went along. But, I mean, you put anything up on the screen and we're going to be excited. And so we get all these numbers like, great, that's phase 4. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's 10 things. Okay, that's about phase 3. Some of them are TV shows, so probably a little bit less production value, probably not quite as much money put into it, a little bit easier to produce. Movies, they are just killing it around every turn with phase 3. So movies, easy, they got this. Mm-hmm. And then August 2019 comes around. 1 month later, at another big expo called D23, where Disney announces all of the Disney things. So Pixar's there, Disney Animation, live action Disney movies, and Marvel needs to have something to announce. And so they announce 4 more things and add it to this already jam-packed phase 4. They announce Black Panther 2. They announce Moon Knight, which is a Disney Plus show, Ms. Marvel, Disney Plus show, and She-Hulk is a Disney Plus show. They announce 4 more things. Now, they don't assign dates to those as they had done the previous 10 things in phase 4. They just say, hey, these are coming. We wanted to announce these here. And I'm like, okay, that seems like a lot. Some of those seem like interesting choices. I'm not sure about She-Hulk, which we share different opinions on. I'm not really sure that I needed a Hawkeye TV series, but okay, sure, let's go. Mm-hmm. Let's see what happens here.
Yes, and Disney Plus definitely was the focal point of this, more so in the second phase 4 announcement than the first. Even though there was Disney Plus shows that were announced then as well, it just definitely felt like at this point we saw that there was really a big focus on Disney Plus, just across Disney as a whole. Like, this was them entering the streaming space. They wanted to make a big splash, and the best way they could do that was having their original content, things that were going to draw people in the same way it draw people to the theaters. It was going to draw them to a streaming service on their whatever you name device. And so this is where it really became like this just like floodgate of content that we were about to kind of get thrown at us. And it was still really exciting. I mean, because it was like, wow, like we're going to have like, we went from having these gaps where, we didn't have these movies, even though we were getting 3 movies a year. We were already spoiled, but we were spoiled. Right. So we wanted more. So the idea of having these TV shows to kind of fill in those space while providing, you're hearing Loki, like we know Loki, we love that, Falcon and Winter Soldier. Like, okay, we know we're gonna see Sam Wilson transition to Captain America. Like, that's really cool. So like having these, and like they were hitting some of the big Marvel MCU plot points into these TV shows, and we can maybe talk a little bit later if that was a good decision or a bad decision. But it was something they were doing, and we all overall seemed okay with it. Like, at least for myself, I was like, that's cool. Like, that's interesting. It's different. It's, like with Endgame coming to an end, with that phase coming to an end, this is how they're going to change things up by now going into the TV space.
Right. And there was a lot of excitement. And I think all the movies tended to make sense for the most part. And the TV shows, for the most part, made sense. It's kind of when we got to the Moon Knight, Ms. Marvel, She-Hulk, that there was part of me that felt like, okay, we're just throwing things out there to create content. And I think that's partially true. I think they did want to tell some of those stories. I don't know if they were ready to tell those 3 stories yet, but there was a push from Disney corporate to put stuff on Disney Plus. Bob Iger, who was, and I guess currently is, the CEO of Disney, was on his way out. He was going to retire. He had been the CEO for a long time. He had kind of overseen Disney's revitalization through the 2000s and then through the 2010s. I mean, he was going to retire with Disney at a really high stock price, at a really solid place. Movies were almost averaging $1 billion a film. Like, you couldn't leave a company any better. And so he was going to hand it off, and he picked Bob Chapek, another Bob, to be his successor. Bob Chapek came up through the parks division at Disney and had overseen a lot of interesting park decisions, some praised by fans, some much maligned, but he was going to take over. And part of Bob Iger's what he was going to leave behind was Disney Plus. Was we're doing this, we're pushing forward, it's going to be there, so we need content, and that makes sense. You have to produce things to draw people there, but the brunt of it was gonna fall on this new CEO, Bob Chapek. And so in November 2019, Disney Plus launches, and Marvel shows aren't quite ready yet. They're not there yet, but I think it launches with Mandalorian, maybe like
Yes,
right off the bat.
yes,
Like it was
that
one
was
of
the
it
first
was
one.
the
Hmm.
flagship through Star Wars. And then in February 2020, Bob Chapek becomes CEO of Disney, which at the time didn't seem like a big deal. But then March 2020 happens and we're hit with COVID
Yes.
and everything shuts down. You can't film anything, you can't meet in person. Disney Plus, it's kind of cool that we had Disney Plus at that point because we had a lot of time to watch stuff, but they couldn't produce stuff to put onto it. They were redoing old material to try to like jazz it up and like behind the scene looks. They were putting up behind the scene things to try to put content out there during COVID. And so everything kind of goes quiet for Marvel in 2020. But at the end of 2020 in December, we get a third wave of announcements that are considered phase four. It's like, man, we can't film anything, we can't do anything else. All we've been doing is dreaming up new ideas for the past few months, but I'm not sure they were all great ideas. They were just ideas that they had. And so they adjust the schedule of Thor Love and Thunder and Black Panther 2, shifting back in the schedule. They say, hey, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantum Mania. So Ant-Man 3 is going to come out. We're developing Fantastic Four movie because they also, through an acquisition of 20th Century Fox, acquired the X-Men characters and the Fantastic Four characters back. They had been off with a different studio. Now everything except for Spider-Man and a few other characters is back underneath Marvel's banner at Disney. And so they're like, man, we're going to do Fantastic Four, which at this point we're all pretty depressed from being stuck inside for a really long time. We're pretty excited about Fantastic Four, but like, guys, we've announced a lot. You can't announce anything more. But they continue, and they
Yep.
announce Secret Invasion, Ironheart, and Armor Wars. And now that I'm looking at this, that was 2020. 5 years later, Ironheart has still not come out. It's coming out here in a few months. But that's a lot of announcements with no actual releases on in theaters or on Disney Plus. At this point, there are, let's see, 20 things that they have announced as a part of Phase 4 or future happenings with the case of Fantastic Four. And but nothing has come out. They had filmed some stuff, but weren't able to finish it. All that sort of stuff. A lot of things that a lot of studios had trouble with during COVID.
I at that time I think I was excited because I felt like, the floodgates had opened, that like I saw as Kevin Feige getting the keys to the city and just
Mm.
having a lot of control. As someone who wasn't as aware of like the CEO and the status of Disney at that time, it was just like, oh, after Endgame and the amount of money it was able to conduct just across the board, we are now in an era where there is no guardrails to what this studio can create. So the
Mm.
idea of getting all of these new stories, like the idea of them creating stories not based on profitability, but based on telling good stories of superheroes that we either have heard of vaguely or know and love. Like for some, like I didn't know about Moon Knight.
Mm.
I I knew very little about. I knew there was a female Hulk, but didn't know much about her. I knew a lot about Miss Marvel actually because of just a video game I played where she was a prominent character. So like having all of these different shows and movies being tossed around, being announced like this, like, and especially after being stuck in, you know, in quarantine for a whole year, like this was like the one thing that really did bring in light, and then,
Right.
and there were some, even darker things happening
Mm.
behind the scenes where, we had Chadwick Boseman passing away,
Mm.
which really changed the course of how we saw Black Panther and the direction that was going. And that happened during COVID as well. So there was just a lot of things that were just kind of happening, but everyone was still very optimistic because COVID was just this once in a century event that just kind of took us away from being able to continue that momentum of, phase 3 going into phase 4.
Right. And yeah, Chadwick Boseman passing was a big deal. I mean, to be honest, I didn't even know he was sick. I didn't know he had cancer. It's just like
Neither.
all of a sudden we're in the middle of COVID, already pretty depressed, and Black Panther dies. And like that's on like and I say it in that way. He played a lot of other great characters, had a lot of great roles. He was a fantastic actor. But I think to the general movie going audience, he was just Black Panther, a character that was new to a lot of us and that we had fallen in love with. And to then go, oh no, like he's not going to be there to play him anymore was a really big deal. And it did derail that franchise to some degree. Whether or
Yes.
not you find Black Panther 2 Wakanda Forever as a good movie or not, beside the point, it definitely shifted the direction of that movie from what it was planned to be.
And really just the direction of how the MCU was going to be led, because they very
Mm.
much positioned him, as I'm wearing my Wakanda jersey for any of our audio listeners, but they really positioned him in a place of leadership in phase three from the very beginning of Civil War, and then even more so in Black Panther, and then throughout Infinity War and Endgame, playing a leadership role. And it, in their marketing, in their conversations, it seemed like they were going to position him to really
Mm-hmm.
be that Iron Man, Captain America face of this new step of Marvel, Avengers, MCU. And so
Right.
all of that, kind of got lost when we lost him. And then also the decision, which took a while for them to kind of come out and say, of where they're going to recast Black Panther. And
Right.
I get both sides of that
Mm-hmm.
argument. My argument to that would be, is like, we need more Black superheroes, not less.
Right.
And I think that, he embodied that character so well that it is hard to imagine. It would be hard for anybody to step into that character.
Mm.
But I still think that it was something that could be done. And I
Yeah.
still hold hope that maybe we can get into that later. But that was a
Right.
decision that definitely left some people upset, because it kind of changed, like, okay, it kind of started bringing in the question of who is going to lead us in this
Mm-hmm.
new movement. Like, yes, we have Spider-Man, yes, we have Doctor Strange, but Black Panther was supposed to be there too, and that was the one that a lot of people felt confident about, from
Right.
a storytelling perspective, from a production perspective, because of how beautiful Black Panther was. Like you said, like Black Panther 2 with him could have easily had that same type of hype,
Right.
accolades that the first one had. But,
Mm-hmm.
we had a completely different story, and had to even include his actual death in the story, which
Right.
kind of getting ahead of ourselves here. But yes, just a lot of different things happening in the MCU before we even really start phase
Right.
4. And so, yeah, just really
Yeah.
crazy.
It is. And I think up to this point, up before the final announcements in December 2020, I was like, okay, we have 14 things. That's good. It didn't really feel like anything was piled on by the new CEO until December, when they announced 3 more Disney Plus series. And to this point, we had 0 Disney Plus series actually come out.
Mm,
That felt like a weird move. And what we would later learn is that Bob Chapek, the new CEO, had put layers of management above Kevin Feige that was dictating which Marvel stories were being produced either as a TV show or a movie. That creative decision of, is this story a TV show or is this story a movie, was being made by somebody other than Kevin Feige, who had orchestrated 23 movies to averaging
mm,
$1 billion almost. And it was being made by somebody who had been in their position about 6 months. And we also learned they came from the world of banking and not the world of movies and creativity. And so some very odd decisions by the new CEO were also at play in the background. But we didn't really know that at this point. All we knew is we had 20 things that were announced and 0 things that had come out. And we were dying for something to get us back to theaters, especially just as a movie fan. It was really hard to not go to the movie theaters for a year and a half. It was
mm.
hard as a sports fan to not go to a sporting event for a year and a half. It was weird when you got to go back to a sporting event. I remember this. I went to a baseball game. It was my first sporting event back, and it was so loud. Like, going to a baseball game was something that I had done every year of my life, multiple times a year, and it just like never dawned on me that that was a loud experience
Mm.
necessarily. But the first game back after having a year and a half, almost 2 years of pretty well silence when it comes to like big events, to go back to a baseball game was very jarring. And like, we had lost touch with some of those communal big experiences that we as humanity love in movies and in sports. So anyway, what actually came out in Phase 4. Because as COVID hit, a lot of these announcements were made pre-COVID. So there was a schedule, and they were ready to come out, and the momentum that Endgame and Spider-Man Far From Home had built was going to continue. But things changed. Production schedules changed. People's comfortability with filming with COVID and everything changed. And so Marvel had to shift their schedule around a lot. And in Phase 4, we got 7 movies, 8 TV shows, and 2 special events on Disney Plus in 2 years. So we went from thinking that 11 things in 4 years was a lot to getting 17 things in 2 years, and it was a lot. So we'll put up those release date shifts up on the screen here for the podcast audience so you can kind of follow along and see how things changed over time. So I'm just going to list them out with the movies first. We had Black Widow, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Eternals, Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Thor Love and Thunder, and Black Panther Wakanda Forever. And then on the TV side, we had WandaVision, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, What If Season 1, which was an animated show, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, Miss Marvel, She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, and then we had 2 television specials, which are kind of like one-shots, about 45 minutes each, with Werewolf by Night and the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. So those are all the things that came out in Phase 4. And I think it's interesting to have all of those things, and they're shifted around in the release schedule. I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier was supposed to be the first show that came out, and they had to push it because a bioweapon was a part of the original story that would release a deadly disease across the whole world. And they
sounds very familiar.
Right. They couldn't release that post-COVID. So they had to go back and change the script a little bit and adjust the show. And especially with like the first couple episodes, you can kind of see where the story was headed and then where they pivoted and went this other direction. So we had a few things come out of order, and there was Black Widow wasn't well received. I love Black Widow. We've talked about that.
I want to talk about Black Widow too, because I think that's when I really felt like there was discord starting to take place with the execution, how we were feeling about this new direction. And this is probably the first time that I actually started getting concerned, not necessarily because Black Widow was bad by my definition, because I love Florence Pugh's character in that and how they executed on introducing her. And I mean, the journey that she has taken from that point on started at Black Widow. So I applaud that for being that point. But Black Widow is interesting because it comes out a year later than it was supposed to. It was supposed to come out in May 2020. It comes out in July 2021. But it also, this is where like Disney Plus kind of plays into the execution of this chapter, where it was a split release on Disney Plus and in theaters. So you can go to the theaters to see it, while, July 2021 was kind of that weird gray area of COVID where things were good, but if you still wanted to play it safe, you probably should. Like, it was still being emphasized to like social distance. Is that what
that was what it was called? Yeah.
Oh man, I can't believe that was a term I heard every day for 2 years. But so because of that, like this is one of, at $379 million, like this is a very low box office movie by Marvel standards. And a large part of that is because of the fact that does not include the Disney Plus numbers. And because that didn't play into those numbers, Scarlett Johansson and her relationship with the MCU kind of soured because of that, because I think her contract was around the box office numbers that got deflated because of Disney Plus. And so this was the first time that you were seeing, and it wasn't that they did anything different. Like, you were starting to see a lot of movies around this time, not so much now, but at this specific time in 2021, have you can either pay $20 and stream it online, like stream it at home, or you can buy a ticket and go see it. So they didn't do anything different. It was just the fact that was an option. And it wasn't, people were watching it at home, probably played into why their experience of it was mixed, because you just can't pay attention to it as well. Things of that nature, not excusing some of the ways that the movie wasn't great, but it still probably would have been received better if everyone had that same audience experience. You were having a split experience based on, because I didn't see it in theaters. I saw it at home.
Yeah.
and I think I was cleaning the house as I was watching it.
Yeah.
So my experience was probably a little bit different, but I still liked
Right.
it. But yeah, so that was interesting. Like that was
Yeah.
the first, and being it the first in this new phase as well. I think that
Yeah.
kind of started setting
It
the
was
tone that things are kind of off.
right, and it was an odd thing to do. They had done it with a few other movies. I think the first one to officially do it was Wonder Woman 1984,
Yes.
which came out, I believe, right on Christmas in 2020. Warner Brothers released it day and date in theaters and on Max, HBO Max, whatever it's called. They released it there, and we watched it at home, and it wasn't a great movie. And we said, "Huh, interesting. Glad we didn't spend an extra $50 for all of us to go see it in theaters." And then I think Disney did it again with Mulan in March of 2021.
Yes, I forgot about that.
And I also didn't like that movie. And so, like, it was very interesting that all these movies are coming out and they weren't putting them out in theaters and they also weren't very good. And it just kind of left a bad taste in your mouth with that day and date release. There's actually statistics that show that if you put a movie in theaters first and then move it to streaming, you get the box office revenue, and then it does better on streaming than if you put the movie straight to streaming.
Yes.
And that includes the day and date release. So, and Hollywood is still struggling with this today of like they're putting some movies straight to streaming and then like, why didn't this do well? This didn't return on our investment of $200 million to film this Ryan Reynolds film and then throw it straight on Netflix.
Yeah.
I wonder what happened. Why does our budget not work? And it doesn't work because you didn't put it in theaters, because not everybody's going to streaming to watch movies all the time. It needs to be in theaters to be in people's faces. Okay, total side tangent there. Done. But I think Phase 4, especially in the movies, is kind of hit or miss. I don't think it's as bad as people remember it being, because there's some really strong movies here. Black Widow, I get. It's not the best Marvel movie ever made. I really like it. I totally understand that other people don't. My brother was actually mad at me for liking it. Like, we're in the middle of COVID, haven't seen each other a whole bunch, and I was like, "Yeah, I really enjoyed Black Widow." And he was like, "Oh, I can't believe you enjoyed that movie. It was terrible." And I was like, he then bought it for me the next Christmas as a joke. So I do own that movie. Anyway, Shang-Chi is a great movie and really good. Eternals was at one point the lowest rated Marvel movie by far at 47% on Rotten Tomatoes, and people did not like it. I still don't understand that. I really love the Eternals, but for some people it's a miss. Then you get Spider-Man No Way Home, and Spider-Man No Way Home is really where I feel like Marvel could have picked up the baton and really gotten back to the height of their powers. I mean, it made $1.9 billion and was just an awesome movie. It was the first movie post-COVID that like you went to a theater and had a similar experience to what we were having pre-COVID with Infinity War, Endgame, Black Panther, Spider-Man Far From Home, all of those movies. This was where they got that magic back a little bit, and where you were freaking out in the theater because you had all three Spider-Man on screen.
Yes.
And it was just so awesome. So I feel like they picked it up there. Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness. Some people like it, some people don't. Again, kind of a miss. Thor: Love and Thunder. I think it's a big miss. Some people thought it was okay.
Miss.
And then we get Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, which again, hit or miss for some people. And so it wasn't until the tail end that we really start to see things start to unravel. I think the first half of Phase 4 was just a little hit or miss. The tail end, you really start to go, huh, what is Marvel doing? It doesn't seem like it's as good a quality as it used to be. What's going on here? But we were, at this point, almost 4 years removed from Endgame. And that's a big gap.
Yes, and I feel like the box office, I don't know if you see it this way, but I feel like the box office is definitely telling a story here as well, with Shang-Chi and Eternals being two new IPs that are being brought into the MCU, and both only hitting 400 million. And Shang-Chi, while having 92 on Rotten Tomato, and one of my favorite movies post Endgames, still being a character that a lot of people just didn't care to invest in. And that could play into, I mean, this was September 2021. I feel like things were starting to clear up there, because I did see this in theaters. I remember it being a packed crowd. So it was a better, we were kind of past getting near the end of COVID there. And it still only had 400. And then same with Eternals, with that ranking as well, 47. But then you have Spider-Man No Way Home. And it goes back to my put him in a suit. This plays in, I was happy and excited about this, but because it played the old nostalgia gimmick, I just knew it just wasn't something that you could really feed off of. But
Right.
it did start opening conversations about the multiverse, which I guess this saga was considered the multiverse saga, if I'm
Yes.
correct. So that
We
was
are in the multiverse saga. Phases 4
so
through 6 are the multiverse saga.
And so that was where maybe that was the plot point that we were all really excited to start to see, because we're starting to see this idea of multiverse, the expansion, what that can look like, bringing in all of these different random characters that weren't around when Thanos was, snapping people left and right. And so we were really excited about that. And you see that excitement carry over into Doctor Strange, where I think that movie flops really bad. It still almost had $1 billion, which
Right.
is really crazy to
Right.
think about now. But I think that that's when that really starts setting the tone that we're kind of all over the place, because it didn't really expand it while marking itself as a movie that was going to set us forward. It left us with more questions than answers.
Right.
And this is when you started seeing post-credit scenes not have the same weight that they did in the first three phases, because that movie came out in 2022 and we have no answers to what happened in the post scenes of that as of May 2025. And so 3 years, exactly 3 years later.
Right. And I think that the multiverse being the Infinity Stones of this saga, I think does it a disservice.
Yes.
Because at this point, this is when it wasn't this movie, but it was Thor: Love and Thunder and Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, where my parents start to go, I don't get it anymore. And I don't, that's nothing against them. They're, to me, in my head, they're the general movie going audience. They're not keeping up with this like you and me. And they're going, I don't really get it anymore. What's the multiverse? Why should I care about this? And I think that the multiverse is cool because you almost can't define it. It can be anything. It's the multiverse. And I think that's a very interesting concept. To make that the connective tissue, though, of an entire storyline is very hard to do because you can't define it. It's hard to follow. It doesn't make sense sometimes. There's lots of issues with that being the connective tissue for the movies and television shows and the stories you're trying to tell. And it makes you question, like you said, everything. It leaves you with more questions. Is this real or is this real?
Yes.
Is this our version of Thor, or is this some other version of Thor? I mean, that's not a question that people asked after Love and Thunder, but, well, they might, maybe we should have. But,
yes.
But you start to have those questions of, okay, what's really going on here? And the TV shows aren't really helping a whole lot. WandaVision very much plays into the multiverse. And Falcon and the Winter Soldier is very grounded. I actually really enjoy that series.
Yes.
Loki is all about the multiverse and the TVA and trying to sever timelines. And it's not like the logic doesn't logic all the time, which, okay, I can suspend disbelief a little bit, but it gets a little wacky. And the TV shows are really where I think we see it degrade really quickly, where the movies are hit or miss. We still had a lot of really good creators involved with the movies. It's really not that much more than Marvel was already doing previously. But to add in all these TV shows on top of it, I think really you start to see in Hawkeye and Moon Knight and She-Hulk, you just start to see this isn't what I thought it was going to be. This isn't as good as I thought it was going to be. And everybody has different opinions on those shows. We very much differ on She-Hulk. It makes my wife mad that we differ so much on She-Hulk.
Well, if it makes her feel any better, I will let my take on She-Hulk decide to it's bad to the point where it's funny. I enjoyed it because it was just like I'm just gonna turn my brain off for 30 minutes. I think also it was that, these shows like WandaVision, Falcon, they were very long, they were very expensive, they were covering very heavy things. I had to watch Loki season 1 twice because of how with the TVA and how they multiverse, it was just very hard to follow. So it was, I don't know if refreshing. It's like refreshing when you like step out of a really smelly place into a place that smells just slightly better. That's what She-Hulk was for me, because it wasn't something that was, and where like You know, I think we have a stronger disagreement in Miss Marvel, because Miss Marvel I just didn't like. I just didn't enjoy it.
Boo.
I know I'm past the teen phase of life. I'm past the teen shows of life. Maybe I'll pick back up on it when I have a kid and they're in that stage of life. But
Right.
being where I was, especially then, even now, it was like I just don't care for this. But She-Hulk was just mindless to the T. It was almost trash television at that point,
Right.
and it was just funny
It was
trash
that.
television. It was like very funny trash television. The ending made no sense, and I just thought it was just funny because it was like we're just throwing everything to the wind at this point. I think by the time She-Hulk came in fall of 2022, we had
Mm-hmm.
now known that we're just kind of lost right now. So
Right.
that was just like a Sharknado moment for Marvel of like, okay,
Right.
this is just what we're doing now. We're having She-Hulk bust into Kevin Feige's office and
Mm-hmm.
harass him about the plot. Like that's what we're doing now. Like, okay, this is just silly.
Yeah.
But
We went way
yeah,
off the rails.
way off the rails. Sorry, but going back into the rails of like what you're talking about with these shows, and kind of one of the things that I really found interesting was that in Loki, which is probably their most, I mean, it is their most successful one. I think that's where, when I talk to people about why they picked up Disney Plus to watch the MCU shows, Loki is a fan favorite and it has the highest
Mm-hmm.
Rotten Tomato ranking for season one. But that's also where we're introduced to Kang the Conqueror, where you're having a TV show. And this was where I struggle to this day with the decision of
Right.
them introducing and positioning Kang the Conqueror, who is supposed to be our next Thanos, and a TV show
Mm-hmm.
introduced by Loki, who,
Right.
while still a beloved character, isn't an Avengers, isn't even in that top roster of characters that
Right.
people really have investment for. And you get that through Loki, but for
Mm-hmm.
him to still, for the show to be called Loki, and it's like, oh yeah, by the way, here's our new big bad guy as
Right.
well. I just didn't get that.
No.
And to this
No.
day, I don't understand why they did that.
No. It's really hard to do that. To put it somewhere that, to be honest, is kind of off in the corner, like a Loki TV show on Disney Plus that's about the multiverse, and that's where he's gonna come into play. Like, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. It's Thanos was a little bit easier to understand as well because it wasn't the multiverse. He was a villain that had motivation and you understood the motivation and all that sort of stuff. Kang was just kind of the shady guy and he dies at the end of Loki. They kill him. But then he's still supposed to be the big bad. And so you really have to accept the multiverse as the path moving forward for Kang to work. And he doesn't seem to work, and to be honest, loses a lot of the general audience, I think.
Yes. Yes.
And even around this time, we start to get announcements about phase 5 and 6, which we'll get into here in just a minute. But to kind of wrap up phase 4 here, because we've spent a lot of time on it, is we had a lack of leadership in phase 4. There's no one that we could just hold on to and be like, this is the person that's going to lead the Avengers when the time comes. Thor is off in some other world doing some goofy stuff that wasn't that funny. We don't have Black Panther anymore, and Wakanda Forever was a hard watch for a lot of people. Loki is doing some weird stuff. Doctor Strange kind of fell flat and said, I'm not in the Avengers. Spider-Man, for those of us that understand the way the Marvel movie rights and everything work, can't really be the centerpiece of the MCU because he's owned by Sony.
Mm-hmm.
And he can play a big part, but he can't be the crown jewel the way they need him to be. And we're kind of left with that lack of leadership. We get some introductions of new characters who some I like, some I don't. And I overall think that phase 4 is misunderstood. That at the end of the day, I think that they had this really interesting idea, and no one's ever said this. This is all Carson theorizing. But I think phase 4 was originally meant to be about loss and grief. That in the aftermath of the snap and the blip, and then COVID in the real world, there's a lot of hard things, and phase 4 was meant to be about loss and grief, but the world no longer wanted that because of COVID as well. We were ready to move past the hard things, and if you look at phase 4, there's a lot of hard themes in phase 4.
Mm-hmm.
Black Widow is a prequel that is about a character a beloved character that was lost in Endgame, and it's about her being kind of jerked back and forth by governments saying, no, you're going to do this for us. No, you're going to do this for us. She gets a false family, loses that family, has to gain it back. That's a really hard thing. Shang-Chi deals with the loss of a mother and then holding a grudge against your father, who's not a great guy. It's a hard thing. Eternals is a loss of purpose. They lose their entire purpose, their entire being in the world. They lose it, and it's taken away by a godlike being that no one really knows or understands, and we still don't know and understand to this day in the Marvel Universe. Spider-Man No Way Home is a loss of identity. He's not the only Spider-Man. Now, there's some catharsis and some, reconciliation and a lot of really cool things that happen in Spider-Man No Way Home, and it's overall a very fun movie, but there's still loss. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, he loses the love of his life. He can no longer be with her and has to deal with a lot of really weird and strange things and grapple with that grief because he was snapped and she moved on. Thor Love and Thunder, same thing. Loses a loved one to cancer and then gains a very weird adoption situation with a daughter.
Very weird.
Black Panther Wakanda Forever.
Do you need to say more?
Very much about loss. And a very hard movie to watch at times. I think Wakanda Forever worked for the most part at the end of the day, and the way that the story ended up, I was okay with. But I understand why somebody was like, that wasn't what I was expecting out of a Black Panther movie.
Yeah.
So it has a lot of hard themes. That doesn't even touch the TV shows where there's Wanda creates kids and then loses kids. Falcon and the Winter Soldier are dealing with the loss of their best friend and leader. Loki is off in the multiverse in the middle of nowhere and dealing with a loss of identity of his own where there's multiple different versions of him. Hawkeye loses his hearing. Moon Knight has multiple personalities, doesn't know who he is anymore. I mean, really, when I break it down, like in my head, like I'm convinced that's what Phase 4 was supposed to be about, was loss and grief post-blip. And I think that was a really cool idea before COVID. And a really unique way of seeing superhero movies as a way to process some of those things. And that in those characters' lives, those would have been real things that they had to process.
Yes.
And have to go through. And I think that's a very interesting way to take the story. I just think with the way the world went, it's not the way that they should have ended up going. Because the audience was not needing that. They were needing the quippiness of Ant-Man and, what's his face? In the Ant-Man movies. Luis. They were needing Ant-Man and Luis with their quickie, fun jokes and, just fun nature. That we were looking forward to that in the MCU. Instead, we got some really hard themes that all kind of depressed us.
And I'll even go bigger than that of like we needed something to look for, like a North Star for us to kind of look towards of like this is where we're going to next. And it's fine. Right. I think it was a hit or miss on like some of these deep conversations. Like I definitely did, Eternals definitely missed that on, Lost. Like I beautifully shot, but just missed that plot. So I do think like it kind of is left to the audience. Everyone looks at grief and loss and those hard topics in different lights. So it's really hard to speak to that. I like to think we all laugh the same. So yes, those quips and things like that, that is just a more easier way to connect with people. I applaud the MCU for trying to like dive into this, especially at the time where we really did need that. But I think the thing that it missed the most, which worked in the previous, was just having something to look forward to, a North Star, where none of these properties were connecting with each other. They were in very subtle ways where it just made you wonder if this is even important or not. All the different theories and fan videos that I caught myself getting lost into, trying to make sure that I was keeping up and understanding how the multiverse worked. And from a plot point, like it sounded really cool because there was so much, it's almost endless what you could do with the multiverse. Like there was still a set of rules in phase 1 through 3. Like there was still very much like, we kind of met the expectation of what was capable. And the biggest thing that was capable was Thanos snapping his finger and half of the population disappeared. Right. Where with the idea of a multiverse where we're having multiple realities blending together, we're having possibility of characters we've never met before, either in different properties, which is still like might be the case, looking at what's in the future, or just bringing in just new characters and using that as a way to bring them in without having to answer where were you during the blimp. It just seemed like there was ways that they could have made it work, but it was just so much that it was just hard. Because Thor and Love and Thunder was the same as like you using your parents. I use my wife as a measuring stick for these things, and that was the same thing. Like after Thor, Love and Thunder, that's when her participation in these Marvel theater trips with me started decreasing because it was just too much for her. She didn't want to watch the shows, which I completely understand. And once it got to a point where the shows were creating plot points for the movies, which happened in Doctor Strange, and not so much in Thor, but Doctor Strange was the one where it really turned her off that these things were blending together, and she now felt like she needed to watch the shows because she was like, I'm just not going to do that. Like that's just too much of an investment.
Yeah, and it's asking the audience a lot to watch that many things. It was pretty simple when it was 3 movies a year. And Thanos' snap, again, is a very simple thing. Very much like everybody, boom, done. And it's terrifying that it's that simple. But that's what made it genius and what made it work, I think. And I think they lost sight of that with the multiverse because in the middle of Phase 4 coming out, well, about 2/3 of the way through Phase 4 coming out at Comic-Con in July 2022, they think it's a great idea to announce even more stuff and to give us a lot more to look forward to or not look forward to at this point, because this is post Multiverse of Madness and post Ms. Marvel, which we start to enter that hit or miss phase for we start to enter that hit or miss part of Phase 4. And they announce Phase 5 and 6, where they officially announce Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, Secret Invasion, a Disney Plus show, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Echo, another Disney Plus show, Loki Season 2, The Marvels, which is that blending of Disney Plus shows and movies with Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, and Photon from WandaVision. Blade is announced. Ironheart, another TV show, which we had known about before, but they officially put a date on it. Agatha All Along, which is a spin-off of WandaVision, another Disney Plus show. Daredevil Born Again, and then Captain America New World Order and Thunderbolts is what they announced as Phase 5. So that's, again, a lot more stuff. We knew about two of those things prior to this announcement. And then they say, and that's not it. We're going to tell you about Phase 6. And they put up another 11 spots for more MCU content in Phase 6. And they announce 3 of those movies. Fantastic Four, Avengers Kang Dynasty, and Avengers Secret Wars. And they say, we've decided that Avengers movies are more the crown jewel of a saga as opposed to a phase at this point, which differs from the Infinity Saga, where each phase had at least one Avengers movie and kind of allowed that connective tissue to connect and then spread back out and connect and then spread back out, and kind of allowed it to grow and breathe organically, where if you're just putting them at the end, I don't think it does that. And so we get a lot more announcements and a lot of people kind of looking around at each other going, I don't know if this is a good idea because we're not loving where this is going currently. So they announce all these things in July 2022, and in November 2022, to skip ahead to the end of Phase 4, Bob Chapek is fired as CEO. Disney's stock prices are doing terrible. Star Wars is a mess. Marvel is a mess at this point. And he is fired. And as a movie podcast that I listen to all the time calls him, Big Papa Iger comes back and takes back over as CEO, coming out of retirement to right the ship and move forward. So the big key point out of that before we jump into Phase 5 here is that there was a lot of production, pre-production, ideas generated. A lot of things happened under Bob Chapek that we are still feeling the effects of to this day, of shows that started being produced that weren't ready to go into production. The writing wasn't good. The CGI wasn't ready, movies that probably should have gone through some more development before being produced. They're all being pushed out fast, 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 fast because Disney Plus has to have content. And if these movies are averaging $1 billion a film, why not put out as many films as possible? Which is not a good strategy. He focused on quantity over quality, and we felt those effects, I think, all the way through Captain America Brave New World, which just came out at the beginning of this year and was one of the first things that we talked about on this podcast. Was we were still feeling the effects of those creative decisions made under a CEO who was not doing a very good job.
And that is part 1 of our MCU deep dive. We decided to split this into 2 episodes since it was so long, talking about the past in episode 1, and in episode 2 we'll talk about phase 5, phase 6, and the future of the MCU. Until next time, consume wisely and stay thoughtful.